Well, would you look at these excited fellas?
Begin transmission.
Burger King and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission want you to know about the voluntary recall of this Pokemon Pokeball.
I'm here to tell you one thing. You ever go whining to the big man again about shit between you and me, we'll have a problem, my friend. You seen these?
Fuck is that?
What's up, my gamer ghouls? It's your boy Glussy Slayer XXL back at it again with some new digs for you to enjoy. The Vin Diesel Power Hour is still in the works, along with a video about the history of fishing in games, and so I thought I needed something a little bit more mellow, something a little smaller. You know, a nice calming experience to really keep my nerves in check since I ran out of those funny little pills I always seem to keep getting deliveries of. So anyway, I started playing Far Cry 2 again. Right, so of all games for me to go back to, you're probably thinking to your little old self, why the heck a real elite gamer like myself picked Far Cry 2 to go back to out of nowhere? And the answer is, I'm not sure, to be honest. The appeal just drew me back in for some reason. Like, it always seems to do that every few years for me. Every once in a while, I just all of a sudden get the hinkering to play Far Cry 2 again, and I never really know why. Since I first played the demo of this game way back on the 360, you know, the before times, I always had this little soft spot in my heart for it. Its darker tone, the way it handles combat, and its setting, it feels like the one time Ubisoft really got it right, and since then they've really never done jack shit to appeal to me for the most part. All the better since the company is a burning trash fire behind the scenes. For its time, Far Cry 2 wasn't the most advanced video game to hit the market. It wasn't a down-to-earth, accurate military sim like something along the lines of Arma, or a bombastic, over-the-top AAA experience that we've come to expect now from most games. Everything's trying so fucking hard to get your attention these days, it gives me a headache. Far Cry 2 is special to me because instead of all this scripted, incredibly boring action hero bullshit, it's the simple story of a mercenary and his weapon in a foreign land trying to profit off of a conflict in Africa. There is no heroes, there is no good cause, just a pure, pointless war which you find yourself stuck in the middle of. It gives you the tools and the setting of a story, but for the most part it feels incredibly hands-off for a AAA title, and honestly it's a pretty strange experience. Maybe that's why it's stuck so much with me in the back of my mind and I always return to it every few years since I've played it. It just has a way of sticking out, and it's a type of major AAA game that we don't really see anymore. That's incredibly rough around the edges and janky in parts, but it still carries a lot of heart with it. It's remarkably hands-off and really just kind of throws you in without too much explaining. I mean, you see your target, you understand why you're there, and that's kind of about it. It's an era that I always like to think back on, and of that era, Far Cry 2 is one of the better examples. Of course, that doesn't mean it's not without its bugs and issues. There's plenty. I mean, it's a PC port of a game that back in the day was already kind of a bit buggy. So, of course, it hasn't aged the best, and it is borderline unplayable in some areas, or borderline impossible to finish because of bugs that show up which you have to research to resolve. On more than one occasion, there was something game-breaking that I just had to pause the game, research for about 30 minutes or an hour, and kinda implement before I was able to even finish. A lot of people also just had to get save files from the end of the game at this point, because there is corruption problems, there is save problems, there's all sorts of issues with this game. But if you're able to get past all that, like I pride myself on being able to, it turns out being pretty well worth it. Immediately upon opening this game, you'll notice that there's some good old-fashioned PC game crust, as was the style at the time, and a hefty amount of the mouse feeling like hot trash to actually even so much as move around on the screen. It feels like it's on some sort of grid or something. It's hard to explain, but it just doesn't feel smooth. This is oddly enough only an issue that plagues the menu, by the way. It's not something that so much appears in gameplay. Unless you're playing with a controller, of course, and then it feels terrible, which is weird because I thought this game was optimized for consoles? Oh man, I don't even know anymore. However, once you get a hold of it, you'll see a few options, with only two that really matter, being single player and Wait, this game is a fucking multiplayer mode? Oh. Okay, yeah, never mind. I don't really know what I was expecting here, to be honest. I guess there's a reason I didn't remember it. It seems like at one point the game did indeed have an active online community, though it never really seemed to catch on like it did with more popular war shooters of the time. I mean, nobody's really gonna be playing Far Cry 2 multiplayer when Modern Warfare exists, so it is what it is. In terms of what it actually offered, it seemed to be a bit, well, barren even for the era. It's bog standard by all means, and, well, incredibly janky, but that's just the gameplay of Far Cry 2 at play. After all, it was a game geared towards single player first. Still, it's worth mentioning at the very least, if for nothing else than to show it off and tell people that it existed. I think most people honestly forgot about it, don't even really ever mention the fact that it does have a multiplayer scene in the first place. Then again, it's pretty easy to forget that most games of this era often had a tacked-on multiplayer suite that nobody ever really dared to touch. Hell, this happens to this day still. I mean, anybody remember that Deus Ex multiplayer? Or the Spec Ops The Line multiplayer? I can't say I'm surprised though. This game came out about a year after Modern Warfare, and as such, the push to include multiplayer online was not surprising. Though it actually reminds me more of older Call of Duty or Medal of Honor multiplayer than the new game changer that was Modern Warfare. In a way, I guess that might be why it appeals to me, and I almost wish I could play it, because this type of old-fashioned war shooter multiplayer game is a genre that's all but died out. I mean, yes, it still exists, but there's a certain vibe of era of this online shooter that, aside from like Halo, never really carried over for me, and even then, that's kind of hit or miss depending on how I'm feeling for the day. That, or I'm just being nostalgic and ignoring the fact that this looks like it was probably not all that well thought up, not that well polished, and it was probably closer to a last-minute addition than a fully planned-out experience intended from the start. It doesn't look the best, and some of these maps look barren, with the lighting system not working particularly well on them. It's hard to explain it, but they just kind of look cheap, feel cheap, and overall the experience I have seen of people playing it online doesn't look like the most exhilarating thing. This game was not made for multiplayer, and it really isn't ever going to be an esport. You know, there's nobody that's going to be playing Far Cry 2 professionally, if you get the drift. Get a quick sip of my coffee here, actually, before I go on to the next part here. It's good stuff. I found this hazelnut blend that I really like. It's a sort of like local bay company, and it's this really good hazelnut flavor. It's so nice. It's just sweet enough where you don't really need to add any other creamers or sugars or anything to it. gotta be my favorite blend of coffee I've ever had. Really good stuff, really fantastic. Once you've wasted a good 5 minutes or so with the curiosity that is the multiplayer mode, you'll select the single player one and really kick this thing into gear. Starting you off with the choice of human-shaped bread you'll be playing as. It might seem like there are a lot of choices at first. I mean, 9 characters seems like an excessive amount, right? Yeah, well, the only trade-off is that beyond the color of their skin and the clothing that covers the player's hands or arms, there is a negligible difference. Beyond the occasional grunt or groan as you pull out a bullet with your rusty pliers, they don't really have anything in the way of characteristics or voices or anything. Aside from those very surface level choices, it doesn't really make a difference and the experience really won't change from player character to player character. Regardless of who you pick, you will bump into these characters in the world when you find them in-game, and they will often be your allies or battle buddies, and they gain slightly more character at that time, but it's still basically kept to a few lines of dialogue, and all the gameplay and animations remain largely the same. They don't really do anything unique. It really would have been kind of cool if these characters had different stats or abilities in combat, you know, anything to even make them slightly different, like certain proficiencies with certain types of weapons, guns, or anything like that. But I get it, you know, that multiplayer suite was really important to the future of Far Cry 2, and without it, we just don't know if anybody would talk about this game today still. Anyway, of course I picked the oldest bastard in the lineup. If time won't kill me, maybe malaria or a few billion bullets in my direction will do the trick, am I right? Alright, baby, back into the action. One of the cool things here is that Far Cry 2 actually throws you pretty quickly into everything and just sets up the whole vibe right from the start. You are a fuckboy that's traveling to Africa in the middle of a war zone to assassinate an arms dealer by the name of the Jackal. A really spooky and serious sounding name, you know, serious stuff going on here. Just look at how it frightens these guards and these people walking down the street. Oh, okay, what the hell is actually going on here? Oh god, yeah, I forgot about this when I started making the video, but there's a very weird bug in this game. I mean, there's many, but this one in particular is, very noticeable if you can't tell. There's a weird bug where this game causes all the characters to basically hop around when they move through pre-scripted animations or jerk about at random when they're talking with their necks snapping. It's really goddamn distracting when this happens in the middle of a serious moment or a speech and we're talking about morality and fucking Jimbo Dimbo over here is snapping his neck threateningly at me in my direction. I mean, Jesus, man, calm down. Are you okay? Do you need help? I'll go get help. Let me get a doctor, okay? Just stay there. Jesus Christ. For real though, if people want to disable the bouncy bingo bango neck snapping bug fucky wucky, there's a pretty simple fix going on here. This is one of those weird old games where things are tied to FPS and VSync settings, so to fix it all you need to do is enable the VSync setting and cap the FPS at around 60. Bada bing, bada boom, no more fucky wucky bingo bongo. Trust me, as fun as this is to watch, you're gonna start wanting to do this or it absolutely fucks with the dialogues and conversation you have in game. And they start sounding like this.
That's cool. What kind? That's cool. You're here to... Maybe next time. What do you do? Ah, shit. What do you... That's cool. What do you do? Ah, shit. What do you... Ah, shit.
I mean, it's just pure insanity stuff, really, here. Also, I should note that sometimes this fix just doesn't work, and I don't really know why or how to fix it in that situation, but yeah, this game has problems. So, once you sort that shit out, you're off to the races, and oh fuck, I've got malaria. When this game came out, this pissed off a decent bit of people for reasons I'll mention later, but needless to say, it means you'll be taking these pills to stave off the yellow piss filter for the rest of the game, so you better get used to it. After you're done getting overwhelmed by the pure density of the piss filter, you wake up only to have the Jackal, you know the main reason you came to this godforsaken war zone, be right there in front of you, taunting you for a moment before all hell breaks loose. Ah, yeah, baby. Steak, baby. Fuck yeah. Let's get into the combat. Let's go! Fuck, I'm dead. Well, game's over. Time to run the credits there, and let's just pack it up here. That was a good game. Pretty good experience. Nice little sim. Good. 10 out of 10. Best video game about Africa. Just kidding, of course, it's a fake out this time, but you know, that's kinda a gameplay loop you get used to, because you can die real goddamn quick in Far Cry 2, especially in the harder modes, which is where I think this game shines even more, to be honest, and it's what I like to play it on. Believe it or not, there are even mods that make the combat more realistic and kill you faster, so hey, I'm not the only one that seems to like it. However, from this point on, things really start to take off and it really starts to get good. Essentially, you're just given the basic objective of hunting down the jackal, and you need to gather information on how to do so, since you aren't given any. You're told to do a mission, and then eventually you go find a job in the city, picking a side in a nameless conflict, neither of which is a particularly good option, to help you further your own cause and hunt this fucker down so you can get your money. And this, my friends, is the butter to the delicious white bread that is the base gameplay loop of this game. This is where things really kick off. You see, I made this video because Far Cry 2 is a game that always has fascinated me for a multitude of reasons. One of the biggest, though, has to do with its framing. Unlike, well, most AAA titles today, Far Cry 2 isn't shy about just making things a little bit gray. You see, everybody on each side of this war is, kind of bad. Each of them are using their own different advantage in different ways to get themselves on the top of the food chain when this all blows over. People abuse power, abuse each other, betray each other, backstab, steal. It's all corrupt politicians fighting for something in this nameless conflict that, at the end of the day, really just harms everybody and anybody involved with it. No matter which side you pick, there is no good side, and instead what is depicted is a somewhat grounded and accurate depiction of what lies at the heart of most conflicts. Greedy men hoping to capitalize on outrage and chaos to achieve their own personal gain, no matter the cost in human lives or homes destroyed in the process. This depiction of the war as something almost hollow instead of heroic, something with real consequences, is something that we rarely ever get to see, with the last time I can think of in games even trying to do this being Spec Ops: The Line, in which it was also very, very heavily inspired by the Heart of Darkness. The depiction of Africa in this game is not a place where people actually live, but of a place with empty ruins where only a few with enough weapons to fight back manage to survive in the multitude of attacks from all sides. There is no people living here. There is no families, merely people trying to escape a war that is decimating everything they've lived in and known their whole lives. War is difficult. It's dirty, and through it all you're just another player trying not to get killed in the process and find yourself in the best possible position in the end, regardless of what it actually does to the nation around you or the people that live in it. Of course, it's not the best depiction of this possible. There have been much, much better ones, but there is something to be said about a depiction of war that isn't heroic, a depiction of war that doesn't have a hero, a good side, any major positive in the conflict involved. It's all pointless. The lives being destroyed, the people being killed, it's all for nothing. It's nameless. All of this doesn't matter. And that is one of the best settings for something like this game, something like the Far Cry series that is imaginable. It's something that a lot of games, a lot of media really misses when they depict war. Instead of depicting good guys and bad sides, you need to depict it as what it actually is. A bunch of men, normally young, throwing themselves into combat for profit, or because they've told to believe in something, or because it's the only thing they can do, given their situation. These people are often thrown into combat encounters like Vietnam or Afghanistan that really, at the end of the day, don't really have a purpose. We have no reason to be involved in these conflicts, and we're definitely not the good side. Yet, still in most of our media, most wars that we take place in, especially as Americans, are depicted as something heroic, something we're doing out of the goodness for our hearts, and not something with ulterior motives. It's sickening, really, and even to this day this plagues most media, as I've mentioned before. Most war games never really talk about this. They don't really talk about war crimes, and for the most part, everything we ever do in any of those games ever is always waved off as all being part of a grander morality and correctness in the world. To sum up Far Cry 2 and why it appeals to me more than most other games, especially in the FPS genre, it's that Far Cry 2 doesn't actually make you the hero. You're just another person that came here for money. You don't really give a shit about the conflict going on, and you sure as hell don't care what happens to this place after you leave. It feels empty. It feels vapid. And
give me the
really,
briefcase.
I guess that's what it is at the end of the day.
They're all here. Good. We'll need them. The APR in the front is still coming after the civilians. Probably think they can kill them or drag them back over the border. The only ones who died today are the ones who are coming. I planted some dynamite out there, by that overhang on the cliff. But the det cord's no good, so one of us has to go up there and short-circuit the blasting caps. That car battery will do the job. The debris will block the road, keep the soldiers from following the refugees. And it'll kill the poor bastard that takes the job. That's either you or me. The other guy's gonna take those diamonds to the border and use them to bribe the guards, so there's no problems with the crossing. Those civilians are making it to the camps tonight, every last raggedy one of them. Then when the handoff's complete, that guy, you or me, is gonna put a bullet into his own head. I'd do both jobs myself, but there's not enough time. The only way this is gonna work is if we see it the whole way through to the end. Every cell of this cancer has to be destroyed. That includes you and me. If we don't finish this and the whole mission has been a waste, a farce, it'll start up again just like it always does. So which one are you taking? Diamonds or dynamite? It's up to you.
Okay, so that got a bit heavy, but the point is Far Cry 2 offers a grounded depiction of conflicts that is often missing from most depictions of war. It's not really a surprise either, I guess, that this game's biggest influences range from a ton of media on wars throughout history, and especially the Heart of Darkness. So, you know, it makes sense, even if it's not like the best at it by any means, that it still manages to try and talk about these topics. But while you're trying to heal you away from your feelies that the rest of the game tries to make you experience in this regard, the other half of it draws you in even harder. The combat. Brutal, clunky, and full of chaos. The combat in Far Cry 2 feels remarkable even to this day, even though it's not the smoothest beast in the world. Instead, it feels weighty, I guess is how I would describe it. Slightly clunky, which, you know, believe it or not, isn't all that far from the truth of real combat. It's clumsy in a way that's hard to explain. I mean, it feels clunky, but clunky in a stalker kind of way, if that makes sense. Combat encounters are often quick and chaotic, starting out of nowhere when a bullet whizzes by your head as you're driving, or you park a little bit too close to the base of aggressors and ending almost as quickly afterwards. A hail of chaos and flames left in your wake. It feels meaty, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, you know? Something later games in the series really failed to capture, in my opinion, by making you feel far, far too overpowered. Which, you know, kind of a shame that the series peaked at its second game, but hey, it's not like other series have done that before, right? Not to say the rest of the series is bad. I mean, Blood Dragon was pretty good. I actually don't mind 5 as much as some people do, but 3 and 4 never actually hit for me because I think a part of it has to do with that gameplay loop ruining the industry for like 6 fucking years and still plaguing it to this day. I mean, just look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This fucking thing, man, it makes me feel like I have heartburn just looking at it. I mean, what the fuck is even going on here? However, aside from the highs and lows of the absurdity of Blood Dragon, the series never really gets close to that same feeling of heavy and grounded chaos. The guns feel hefty, and the ways that you can spread fire across the ground, or a few well-placed grenades can level the playing field, it just kind of makes it feel a lot more grounded. It makes it feel like you're doing a lot more with a lot less. The grounded combat also carries directly into the gameplay with a lack of a real mini-map or minimal HUD. The only way you're really going to maneuver through the world is by the use of a physical map you actually have to pull up and look at in real time, which means you can spend time looking for the nearest gas station when bing bam boom somebody wants you fucking dead again. This desire for realism is actually somewhat of a veneer across the entire game. When your cars get damaged, you have to repair them. When your weapons are old and rusty, they jam more and can even explode in your hands. It's something that you have to manage, and there's parts of it that are annoying, sure, like getting malaria at random points and having to take medication, or your gun jamming in the middle of combat, but those, to me, are special, and they kind of make Far Cry 2 unique. However, it's not without its flaws, and as I said, the game do indeed feel clunky. It has that early 2000s PC game scrum, as I like to call it, meaning everything feels just slightly too clunky or too slow to really be smooth, but it's still weighty and satisfying, at least for the most part. What's a bit more annoying than the actual game feel is the pure, unrelenting amount of downtime between encounters. Driving to every mission is fun at first, but the 70th time you're going to a place to kill a guy to get whatever, it just gets a little bit boring, you know? A better radio selection, or maybe a talk show like the later games have with a host with more personality, would mean a lot here. For now, you're just kind of driving in the silence until somebody decides to shoot you in the middle of the road. Don't get me wrong though, the game does have fast travel, it's just, it's not great. It takes you to the corners of all the maps, but anything that's like in the middle, there's no real good position to be in, so no matter what you're doing, you're going to be driving for an inordinate amount of time. So you better get used to it. However, it's still a bit tough to swallow when I get a mission update and... Oh! Yeah, it fucking sucks at times, man, I tell you what. Only made worse by the fact that these checkpoints on the road regenerate so quickly, they end up being more annoying than fun, because all you want to do is just drive your fucking car from point A to point B, and these God, fuck, man, I just stole that. Christ, these people are such dicks, man. Just let me do fetch quests in peace and steal cars. However, what it has in clunky and outdated game design, it also makes up for in things that other weaker people would call negatives that me, a gamer Chad that I am, absolutely adore and kinda miss. Wish they were in more games today. The most obvious one is of course the addition of malaria as a mechanic and the use of weapon degradation, both which add an element of randomness to the flow of gameplay. You have to make sure your weapons are well kept or they'll explode, and you have to make sure you're stocked up on malaria pills or you'll just fucking die. Another factor which adds to this is the addition of the partner system. Basically, people you meet along the way in the game and doing missions along with other mercenaries from the start, they will come from time to time to assist you in combat and heal you on occasion when you've been downed and would otherwise die. They tend to carry you out of the combat, and sure, the cutscene is the same like every time, but it is nice to have these come in from time to time so you have a revive for yourself. These steps of randomness add another layer to the game, which is part of why to this day it is so fondly remembered. The element of randomness means that everybody has a unique story of Far Cry 2 that happened to them and them alone. There's a reason people still talk about Far Cry 2, but don't really talk about the others in the same way. It's the same appeal as Kenshi or Disco Elysium or anything where random chance is at play. It creates a unique story for each player, and as an effect, the experience is remembered far more because of it. In the middle of combat, your gun can simply explode, causing you to have to run around and scavenge for a firearm in the middle of combat while taking fire. You can rush into an attack and try to finish off a target, only to have your weapon jam and cause you to need to retreat into the forest and hide. You can run out of medicine in the heat of battle for your malaria and simply collapse onto the ground, only to have a teammate swoop in last minute and save your life. The possibilities are vast and endless. Sure, there can be more to add to it, but for the time I remembered being really wowed with this aspect of the game. It felt well and truly unique, and all these additions, all these unique digs and realism and gun exploding systems and jamming systems, it's something that hasn't really been done today. I mean, the only thing I can remember that has had weapon jamming in like ages was Synthetic, and it absolutely rules in that game for the same reason it rules here. It makes the combat fun, and it makes you have to deal with unpredicted situations. Things don't always go according to plan. I also think in general it helps Far Cry 2 be a lot more grounded than any of the other games in the series. Well, Far Cry 3, 4, 5, they all make you feel like a god, like a one-man killing machine, a one-man army. Far Cry 2 instead makes you feel relatively weak. I mean, there's only so much you can do here, really, and you're so easily killed that you kinda have to sit back and take pot shots. You have to plan things out a little bit better. You can't just run into combat and rely on your weapons hoping that they'll be dependable. Things can fail on you, weapons can jam or just explode, so instead you need to be smart, think on your feet, plan things out. Maybe go stop by the shop and get a brand new sniper rifle instead of just rushing from mission to mission and hoping to get things done with a weapon that's bound to explode on you at any random moment. All these elements of randomness also just make you a lot more weak when compared to other games. You're not a god, you're not some mercenary that can kill everybody without even thinking twice. You're a malaria-riddled man that sure might have some military experience, but also has to deal with weapons that are vastly out of date and not well kept at all in a nation where, well, things aren't exactly advanced. And while a lot of people, especially during the release of this game, think these systems make the gameplay unfun, I think it actually helps to make the player feel less empowered than a lot of other games do at the time, and even to this day. Video games are supposed to make us feel empowered, sure, but sometimes it's nice to actually know that the situation that we're in is a struggle. Far Cry 2 feels like far more of a war zone, far more of a rebellion than any of the others, because it's far harder than any of the others. I guess maybe that's why I wanted to talk about it. I mean, Far Cry 2 is a pretty outdated game in more than a few respects. Its story is rather dry, and while it does have interesting aspects and setups, the real lack of focus on the grandeur of its story does feel a bit empty. It never really takes off, and the Jackal is far less menacing or interesting than the developers want you to believe. The concept of him is fascinating, and he does have some interesting ideology that comes up from time to time, but he only really ever shows up for about 3 cutscenes, doesn't really say much, and isn't really much of an enemy in the first place. You could say it's a bit of a far cry from the rest of the series, which is more interested in making its villains memorable than its environments interesting. But at least to me, and well, clearly a few other people, given the following the game still has, the individual moments of combat, or the vertical slice of the average gameplay loop, is enthralling and addicting in a way that most games aren't. It and Stalker and even I Divine Cybermancy have that in common for me, and I think they stand a lot closer together than some people know or even consider. Far Cry 2 is like both of those games, but packaged for, boring people. All of these games randomize elements of the gameplay and are more of a vast sandbox for player stories than being truly about a unified main story or concept. What does exist at the end of the road is fine, and does have some interesting bits, and sure, it has good core ideas, but it mostly feels really ham-fisted and not exactly earned for your mercenary at the end of all this to suddenly get a chance to be good when you spent the rest of the game only caring for yourself and nobody else. Instead, the things I remember are these heat-of-the-moment chaotic battles and the feeling of scrambling, trying to solve problems on the fly when things didn't go according to plan. This, for me, is Far Cry 2. The joy found in absolute chaos. The scrambling to pick up rusty rifles to fend off nameless fighters rushing towards you for a cause you don't even know. I can't help but absolutely love it. This is war, after all, and there are no heroes here. Only madmen who can find peace in the slaughter. Once again, we are here at the old end screen, and thank you for sticking around. It really does mean the world to me and this godforsaken shit algorithm that I'm trying to build a career off of. It really does mean a lot to me to have this support on my silly little channel where I make my silly little videos. I just want to let people know once again that I do have a Discord and a Patreon for which you can subscribe to get access to things like behind the scenes info, QA sessions, and premiere access to videos a few days early in addition to the Discord link, which will eventually be locked behind it. Be sure to get in now before you have to pay for that one, bucko. Gonna be doing movie nights and streaming my gameplay in there in the near future, so look forward to that. I'm still poor as dog shit, but your support gives me hope that one day I might even be able to afford a full 5-star meal. Until then, I have enough Baja Blast and day-old pizza to get me through anything. Just want to quick let everybody know that, as mentioned before, there are larger projects in the work at the moment, and a few other projects I want to start off as soon as I can, but I have currently been in the process of moving and other things are going on in my life, so it's been a bit hard. I want to start breaking off into other genres that you might not have come to expect from me so far, so look forward to that in the future, my little goth ghouls. It should be a pretty fun experience. I have a whole bunch of things that I'm planning. There are some possible podcast things I'm thinking about working on, but I'm trying to make sure and gauge that people would actually want something like that. Some are a bit more scripted than others are a little bit more off the cuff, but I will talk about that stuff in the future, particularly on my Patreon probably and in Q&A sessions, so I'll cover that stuff in future. I wanted to make this video not long, but I don't know how much that's going to happen, so oh boy, well, I'm going to go ahead and start editing, so why don't you guys just kind of relax and yeah, get ready for those future... oh shit, Oh shit! All right, it's time for me to go, everybody. Stay safe, and you just remember that I love you very much.
Transmission.